Now, among the tools that we have at our disposal to lose fat, we talked about steady state, we talked about weight training. Now let's talk about intervals. Intervals for many years have been touted as the godsend of body composition, the most powerful tool to incinerate fat, bro, okay? And of course, still going back to the first capsule in this series, using the sprinter versus marathon runner analogy. You know what, again, sprinters don't do intervals. It is counterproductive to their training. So, intervals, they're not bad. They can be useful when used by the right person, at the right time, at the right dosage. But it's far from being the be-all, end-all tool that will just melt away the fat you have. It's just not true. Let's look at everything in perspective. First, the number one argument that people who are recommending intervals, the number one argument they say they use is the EPOC effect. EPOC, excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption. So basically, hours after the session has concluded, you are utilizing more oxygen still, which would indicate that you're burning more calories even at rest. Well, you know, and that is the big argument. Well, keep burning calories hour after the workout, bro. Cool. But it is very overstated. Studies have shown that at the most, EPOC will account for 6 to 15% of the calories you burn during a workout. Let's use a very simple figure, 10%, which is right in the middle of the zone. So if you burn 400 calories during your interval session, which is a pretty high number for an interval session unless you did an interval session lasting 25, 30 minutes. So it's a pretty good number. So let's say you burn 400 calories. It means that the EPOC will burn roughly 30 to 40 calories more. That's not huge. I'm not saying it's insignificant. It might play a role in the long run, but it's certainly not what I would call a big argument. I mean, you could just eat half an apple less in your day and you're going to get the same effect, okay? So it's certainly not like the big selling point that they make it out to be. The way they make it out to be, you're doubling the number of calories you're burning, man. It's not that. It's 6, 10, 15%. Now, 15%, even 10, would be at what I consider the real intervals, the way the science studies conducted them. Like, when you do the high-intensity section, you're almost puking your guts out. Most people in gym, when they do intervals, the portion called high intensity of the intervals, it's barely enough to be qualified as the average intensity of the interval. In other words, people who are doing, like 90% of the population doing intervals in gym don't do the high enough in intensity to trigger a very high EPOC. Most people will get a 5-6% increase in the EPOC, if that. So it's not a lot. It's not a lot. Now, then you have to question yourself. Why am I keeping my metabolic rate elevated after the session? And why is it proportional to the intensity? Could it be that adrenaline plays a role? Could it be that if I go all out like crazy when doing my intervals, I'm pumping adrenaline because I need it to mobilize fuel, I need it to be amped up, I need it to increase my heart rate? Makes sense, right? Now, adrenaline, what it does is that it speeds up the nervous system, puts you in what we call sympathetic mode, fight or flight mode, which is useful, of course, during the workout. What happens when it stays elevated for hours after the workout? Because that's what we're talking about. EPOC will increase caloric expenditure for hours after the session. So adrenaline must stay high for hours after the session. Well, it has two problems. The first problem is the adrenal receptors are not meant to stay activated for hours. It's like the NOS in your car. It's a short-time boost. The adrenal receptors can become desensitized very easily. Otherwise, your body would always be amped up. So if the adrenal receptors stay activated for too long in a row, you can desensitize them to avoid that situation happening again. And when that happens, then your motivation goes down, you feel like shit because even your own adrenaline is not enough to get you up. We have the same thing happening with people who are abusing stimulants. They are abusing stimulants, which means that their adrenal receptors are always activated, and as a result, the body will desensitize them. Bodybuilders utilizing the drug clenbuterol. Clenbuterol is basically ephedrine, a stimulant, but lasts 16 hours in the body. So for 16 hours, your adrenal glands stay activated. Not surprisingly, bodybuilders report that they stop responding to clen in 10 to 14 days. They have to drastically increase the dosage. And if they stop, they will have symptoms of depression because the adrenal receptors don't even respond to their own adrenaline because it's not high enough versus the clenbuterol. And you feel like shit, no motivation, you feel like crap. That's the first thing that can happen. That's the first type of CNS fatigue, which is just neurotransmitter fatigue. The second thing that can happen, if I keep producing adrenaline for hours after the workout has concluded, well, remember that adrenaline is made from dopamine. So if I keep producing adrenaline, I'm always using the dopamine I have to produce adrenaline. Over the long run, that can lead to dopamine depletion. And that leads to what? No motivation, no drive, mood swings, depressed state, lethargy. All signs of CNS fatigue. CNS fatigue exists, but it's mostly neurotransmitter issues. So that's the first thing bad that can happen. The second thing is when your adrenaline stays high, you are in sympathetic mode, it means your cortisol is always high. Cortisol goes hand in hand with sympathetic mode. When you are amped up, cortisol is being produced. So yeah, okay, you can use the argument that EPOC will burn more calories, but then I will counter that it will also lead to a higher cortisol level and maybe dopamine depletion and maybe adrenal receptor desensitization, which can make you feel like total crap in a few weeks. And what happens when you feel like crap and you want to subconsciously raise dopamine, you're gonna eat crap. You're going to have cravings for sugar, have craving for pizza, because your brain knows that when I eat those pleasure foods, I get a dopamine rush. So maybe even if you would get more benefits from the interval, in the long run, it could actually lead to bad results because of the cravings. That having been said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like intervals have many benefits. They will increase mitochondrial efficiency. If your mitochondria are more effective, it means that you're burning fat for fuel more easily. So if you do the steady state to increase mobilization and you do the intervals to increase fat burning, well, 24/7, you're mobilizing more fat, you're burning more fat, making it easier to lose fat. So that's a good thing. The other good thing is that there are studies being shown that intervals could actually break down scar tissue on the heart that is caused by the overuse of steroids or gaining too much muscle or just cardiac hypertrophy, left ventricular hypertrophy. So from a health perspective, especially if you are a bodybuilder from the dark side, intervals can actually be protective. And it also burns fat. So it's a matter of understanding the dose to benefit relationship. Once or twice a week intervals, once you are good at mobilizing fat, will be very efficient. Doing it 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week is just too much for the body to handle. It will have negative impact on every other facet of your training. So know why you're using a certain tool and how you can use it. With intervals, you use it once you are already good at mobilizing fat, and you use it sparingly, like once or twice a week. That is more than enough to get the mitochondrial efficiency that you need from the exercise. So understand the purpose of the tool and use it properly.